So for any one congenital anomaly, and whatever your child might have, you can substitute in congenital heart disease or congenital diaphragmatic hernia or esophageal atresia or a facial cleft, whatever it might be. And this is true of almost all of them. The question I'm going to ask you is, how many different genes do you think might cause this? And I'll be very clear when I say this. When I'm talking about this for the purpose of this first question, I'm talking about a single genetic factor that really is most likely the explanation for the majority of the risk for your child. So in other words, we're going to make this simple and say in a overly simplistic way that there's one gene that's causing this. How many genes would you guess there are that might cause a congenital heart disease? I'll give you a second to think about that. So our best estimates, although we haven't cataloged all of them yet, our best estimates are probably about 500 different genes just causing congenital heart disease when there's one strong genetic factor. And that's true. Our estimates are looking like that's probably true for congenital diaphragmatic hernia as well. And we're earlier in looking at some of the other birth defects, but it's starting to look like that for esophageal atresias, or what we call tracheoesophageal fistulas. Those tend to cluster together. We can do these things that we call power analyses, where we try and figure out how many people, how many participants, how many families do we need if we want to identify those 500 different conditions. So I want you to think for a second in terms of how many families you think that might mean that we need to study to be able to understand that. The answer is, this is to me a scary kind of answer in terms of how big these have to be, over 100,000 individuals. 100,000 families, and we'll get into a little bit later what it means by that. But when you think about that, that's a lot of people in terms of being able to do this. And so we're doing, I think, a fantastic job. We've been at it for a long time. For many of these studies, we've been doing this for over 10 years. But even for those studies where we've been doing it for over 10 years, we do not have close to 100,000 people in terms of doing it. So we haven't got this all figured out. The good news is that the technology, as I said, has advanced. The prices of what it costs to be able to do all of this have certainly come down, so that if magically somehow I could just snap my fingers and we could have 100,000 families participating, we actually do have mechanisms to do this genetic characterization even of 100,000 families. So it's not cheap, it's not easy, but there are ways of being able to scientifically address these questions.